Hello and welcome. In this video we're going to learn how to integrate Twilio with Node.js and how to send text and media messages, make phone calls, play an audio file, and also implement text-to-speech in phone calls. So Twilio is a cloud communications platform that enables developers to build and integrate various communication features into their applications. It provides APIs for a range of services including voice calls, text messaging, video, email, authentication, WhatsApp, and SendGrid integration, and much more. Before we start coding, first thing you need to do is to create a Twilio account if you don't have one yet, by visiting Twilio's official website, which is twilio.com. And you can click on Start for Free on the top right. And on the sign up page, it will ask some basic information like name, email, and password. Once you're done, you can click on Continue. Then it will ask some questions like why are you using Twilio for marketing, learning, and other options, what coding language are you going to use, and other simple questions, just so Twilio knows what's your preferences. Later, it will also ask for your phone number for a two-factor authentication process. And also, it will activate the number so you can test sending messages and making phone calls to that number. Since I already have an account, I'll click on Login here on the bottom. And I'll just log with one of my personal accounts here. And to verify my account, it will send a 6-digit code to the phone number I registered. So let me type here. Okay, this is the Twilio's dashboard, and depending on the options you answer on the registration, this might be different. So Twilio is not free, but it gives you a trial of $15.50 so you can use. And you can upgrade this by clicking on Upgrade and informing some basic details and also payment methods, so you can switch to a full paid account. And here on the drop down, note that Twilio automatically creates an account for us. You must have an account to integrate with Node or other technology because we need some keys here: the account SID and the authentication token. We'll see later how to use these keys inside our Node application. Okay, so to start sending text messages and making phone calls, we must have a Twilio number. We could configure a personal number here on Twilio, but there are several limitations, so it's better to use a phone number generated by Twilio. We can buy Twilio phone numbers, or we can use a trial number for testing, using the trial credit we have here. So for our example, we'll just use a trial phone number. So to create a Twilio phone number and send messages, we can click on Messaging on the left side menu and expand the Try It Out option and click on Send an SMS. And let's create a trial phone number by clicking on Get Trial Phone Number. Great, so this is the trial number that Twilio created for us. And we can also access this number by clicking on Twilio Home on the top left and select our account that Twilio created for us. And the trial phone number appears below the keys here. Okay, so we have everything we need from Twilio and we can get started on coding. I'll be using VS Code for the tutorial, but feel free to use any other code editor you like. I have an empty folder open here on VS Code called Twilio with Node.js. Let's start by installing the dependencies we'll be using. So let me open the terminal here on the top. And we could create a Node app by typing npm init. But to make it simple, let's just install directly the dependencies we'll be using. So I'll type npm install. And we're going to use the Twilio official library. And also install .env, just so we can store our Twilio API keys securely. Okay, hit enter. Great, dependencies installed, and we have a new package JSON file with the two dependencies we just installed. Now here on the root of our application, I'll create our main file, which we're going to write and run all our examples. So new file, and we'll call this index.js. And still on the root, we need to create the .env file to store our Twilio account SID and authentication token keys. So new file, .env. Great. So let's start by adding our Twilio keys inside the .env file. So I'll create a new environment variable called Twilio underscore account underscore SID, which is equals to, let's grab the account SID inside our Twilio account. click on copy, and paste here. And also we need to store the authentication token, so I'll create another environment variable called Twilio _auth _token, which is equals to, let's copy the auth token and paste here. And make sure to use your own Twilio keys, because after the video I'll be removing this account with the keys and the trial phone number as well. Okay, we're all done with the .env file. Now let's create the examples inside the index.js file. So I'll start by importing and initializing the .env module here on the top. So require, and inside the .env module. And here on the end, to load our .env file, we can add .config function. And I'll also import Twilio, so const Twilio equals to require Twilio. And to initialize Twilio, here on the end, we need to call as a function, and inside we need to add the account SID and the authentication keys as a parameter. And we need to grab from the .env file here, so we need to call process.env, and let's copy the variable name here, so the first is the account SID. Okay, and paste the name here. And the second parameter is the authentication token, so process.env, and let me copy the name here and paste inside. Perfect. So now that we configured Twilio inside our Node app, we can start using it. So let's start by sending an SMS. So when you register your Twilio's account, you enter a phone number. That phone number is automatically set as a verified phone number. And since we're using a Twilio trial account, we can only send messages and make phone calls to the verified phone numbers. We can add other phone numbers to verify and test by expanding the phone numbers option on the left side menu, then click on manage, and then on verify caller IDs. So here it will appear the number you enter upon registration, and we could add more numbers here to test SMS or phone calls by clicking on add a new caller ID. But I'll just use the one I add on the registration, so let me copy here. And I'll paste this verify number inside the .env file. So I'll create a new environment variable called phone _ number, for example, and paste the copy number here. Perfect. Now back on the index.js file. So I'll create a function here to send text messages to the number we just added inside the .env file. So async function, and let's call this send message. And inside I'll create a new const called message, which is equals to await the Twilio module we imported, .messages, .create. And inside we can configure some options inside an object. So here we can set the body property, which is the message we want to send. So I'll just add something like, hello, this is a test message using Twilio with Node.js. Okay, next we need to set the from property, which is the trial number that Twilio created for us. So back on Twilio's dashboard, let's open our account by clicking on Twilio Home on the top left, then select our account. And below the keys here, let's copy my Twilio phone number and paste on the from property. Last, we need to set the to property, which is the number we want to send the message. So in this case, I'll add the number I added inside the .env file. So process.env.phone _ number. Great. Now I'll just write a message on the console just so we can check the results inside the message constant here. So console.log, and inside the message constant. Okay, now we just need to call here on the bottom our send message function. And before we test, since I'm using Mac and I'll be sending the message to a phone number configured on an iPhone, so I'll be using the iMessage app on Mac just so we can test. So all the messages received on the iPhone will also appear here on the iMessage. So let's test this to make sure it's working. And I'll open the terminal here on the top and let me clear. And to run the index.js file, we can simply call node index.js or just index and hit enter. Great, let me open the iMessage app and let's wait for the SMS. And perfect, here's the message we just sent. Note that it's showing this message sent from your Twilio trial account here in the beginning, but once you update it to a paid plan, this message won't be showing anymore. And then the actual message we sent, which is hello, this is a test message using Twilio with Node.js. Awesome. And here on the terminal, we received some details of the message we sent, and for every message or phone calls we made, it will generate an SID unique for that message or phone call. Perfect. We can also send media files on the message body like images, videos, and others. These are called MMS, which stands for Multimedia Messaging Service. For that, we can add a property here on the messages create object called media URL, which is an array. So even if we just send in one media URL, we still need to add inside an array. But the media only shows on the message body if you're sending to a US or Canada number. For other countries, it will show a Twilio link pointing to that media file. Since I'm sending the messages to a Brazilian number, it will just send a tiny link and we won't be able to preview the media inside the message body, unless we click on the link. But let's give it a try just so we can test. So I'll just paste a URL pointing to an image here, and let's open this URL on the browser just so we can check the image. Great, just a simple image of the beach. Let me close the tab here. Great, now before we test, I just want to inform that since I'm not sending to a US or Canada number, this message with the media URL might take some time to be sent. So along the video, I'll open the iMessage app as soon as the media message arrived. So let's run the example again. Let me open the terminal and type the node index command. Okay, we got a success response, but unfortunately the message might take a few minutes to arrive. But remember, this is for MMS sent outside of US or Canada. So let's continue with the tutorial and we'll be back here soon. So besides sending SMS and MMS, we can also make phone calls with Twilio. The MMS just arrived. That was actually fast. So here's the same message from before, but this time we receive a Twilio link with an image. So let's click. And there it is, the same image from before. Great, let me close here. And as you can see, it's not the original image URL. Instead, Twilio generate what we call a tiny link. Okay, so besides sending SMS and MMS, we can also make phone calls with Twilio and play an audio file, like a recorded message. We can also send a type of file called TwiML, which stands for Twilio Markup Language. It's an XML-based language used by Twilio to define how phone calls and messaging interactions should be handled. TwiML allows us to specify various instructions for Twilio services, including handling calls, sending messages, and interacting with the users. So below here, let's create another function, but this time to make a phone call to the same number we send the message up here. So async function, and we'll call this make call, and inside I'll create a new constant called call, which is equals to await twilio.calls.create method. And we can also configure some properties inside an object. So to send an audio or TwiML file, we can set the URL property, and I'll paste a URL pointing to an MP3 file with a recorded message. Now let me paste this URL on the browser just so you can hear the audio. Okay, click on play. Hello, this is an example of how to make calls using Twilio with Node.js. Alright, just a simple message, and back on the code. We also need to set the method property, because by default Twilio expects this URL here to be a post URL. But in our case, I'll set to get, And we also need to add the from and the to properties, which we can copy from the send message function up here, because we're sending from our trial phone number to our verified phone number. Okay, and I'll just write the result on the console. So console.log, the call constant from up here. So call. Okay, now down here, let me comment the send message function call and call the make call function. And I'll be using FaceTime to receive the call, and when I answer, since we're using the trial account, before actually playing the MP3 audio file, it will play a recorded message from Twilio warning us that we're using a trial account, that we can update to a paid full plan to remove the recorded message, and that we need to press any number to continue and play the actual MP3 file. So let's test all this. I'll open the terminal and clear and run again node index command. Okay, let's wait for the incoming call. Great, let's accept on FaceTime. And it takes a while to answer.
Can remove this message at any
okay,
time
here's
by
the trial
uploading to a
message.
account. Press any key to execute your code.
Let's press any key here.
Hello, this is an example of how to make calls using Twilio with Node.js.
Perfect, so we just heard the MP3 file with the recorded message. And besides sending an audio file, we can also send a TwiML file containing instructions of what Twilio should do. So I have a link here pointing to a TwiML file here so we can test. Let me open on the browser so you can see the structure. And the TwiML file is basic, a XML file, and we have to start with the response element, which is the root element. And then to play an audio file, we can add the play element, and inside the link to the audio file we want to play when a user answers the phone call. Note that is pointing to the same MP3 file that we used it from before. So let's replace on the URL property the MP3 file to this TwiML file. Okay, let's test again. So back on the terminal, and I'll run node index command again. Okay, let's wait for the call. Great, let's accept the call and wait for the trial message.
You can remove this message at any time by
okay, the trial message.
Press any key to execute.
Let's press any key here.
Hello, this is an example of how to make calls using Twilio with Node.js.
Perfect, so we heard the same audio from before, but this time sent through a TwiML file. Great. Now, instead of setting the URL property, we can pass the TwiML instructions directly here on the object by setting the TwiML property, and let me add backticks here and comment the URL and the method properties. Let me just add a line here inside. So for example, let's copy the TwiML content from the file here on the browser and paste inside the TwiML property. Let me just format here real quick. And let's test again to make sure it's working. So back on the terminal, I'll run node index command. And let's wait for the call. Okay, let's answer. Wait a little.
You can remove this message at any time by upgrading to a full account. Press any key to execute your code.
Okay, press any key.
Hello, this is an example of how to make calls using Twilio with Node.js.
Great, so we heard again the same audio file, but this time we send the TwiML instructions directly inside the object. But the greatest thing about TwiML is that we can implement text-to-speech functionality. So instead of adding the play element here to play an audio file, let me remove here, and we can add the say element, and inside we can type any text we want that Twilio will convert to audio. So for example, I'll type here, hello, this is a message from Twilio using text-to-speech. Let's test this to make sure it's working. So back on the terminal, I'll run node index command. Okay, let's accept the call.
You can remove this message at any time by upgrading to a full account. Press any key to execute your code.
Press any key.
Hello, this is a message from Twilio using text-to-speech.
Perfect, we just implement text-to-speech using TwiML instructions. This way we don't need to upload files and send on the calls. We can also set some attributes here inside the say element, like the voice attribute. So by default, the audio had a woman's voice, but we can change here to man, for example. So let's test, back on the terminal. I'll run the node index command. Okay, let's wait for the call on FaceTime. Okay, accept.
You can remove this message
And
at
I'll
any
just
time
press
by
any key
upgrading
here.
to a full account. Press any key to execute.
Hello, this is a message from Twilio using text-to-speech.
Awesome, so we heard the same message from before, but with a man's voice. And we can also set the language attribute. By default, the language is English, but for example, I'll set to Portuguese by typing PT-BR in capital, which stands for Brazilian Portuguese. And I'll type a Portuguese message here saying something like have a nice day in English. So tenha bom dia, for example. And let me remove the voice attribute because for Portuguese language we have other voices. Let's test again. Open the terminal and run node index command. Okay, accept.
You can remove this message at any
And I'll just
time
press
by
any key
upgrading to
here.
a full account. Press any key to
Bom dia.
Okay, so that was fast actually, but we heard the message with a Portuguese accent. So for each language, there are different kinds of voices as well, and you can check the complete list of languages and voices that Twilio supports by visiting the website I'll leave on the screen. And here are all the languages and voices we can set for each particular language. So here in the drop down, let me select Brazilian Portuguese. And note that we have some male and female voices. And what we need to set on the voice attribute is this voice name column here. Feel free to test all voices if you want on the language you chose here. So back on the code, we can also send other instructions here by adding other elements. For example, if we want to add a pause between messages, we can add the pause element. And we can add an attribute inside called length, which is the number of seconds we want the pause to be. So for example, I'll add 3, and let me remove the language attribute from the say element here, and type a message in English like hello. This is a text to speech message, for example, and let me copy the say element here and paste after the pause element. And here I'll change it to thank you for waiting. So when we accept the call, it will say the first message here, pause for 3 seconds, and say the thank you for waiting message. Great, let's test again, back on the terminal. Let's run node index and wait for the incoming call on FaceTime. Okay, accept. Wait for the message.
You can remove this message
Press
at
any
any
key.
time by upgrading to a full account. Press any key to exit. Hello, this is a text-to-speech message.
Okay, here's the pause.
Thank you for waiting.
Awesome. So we can set multiple instructions of what Twilio should do inside the TwiML property. And you can check the complete list of TwiML functionalities by visiting twilio.com/docs/voice/TwiML. And if you scroll down a little, here's the list of verbs that we can set as an element. So the say to convert text to speech, the play to play an audio file, we can set the dial element to add another party to the call, the record to record the call, gather to collect digits from the caller, and then we have the hang up, as the name already says, to hang up the call, pause that we just saw, redirect to redirect the call to another number. So we can do many things with Twilio using the TwiML property. Awesome. So we learned on this video how to integrate Twilio in a Node.js application by sending SMS and MMS, making phone calls, play an audio file or send TwiML file, and we also learned how to implement text-to-speech on a phone call, and other TwiML instructions. I'll leave the GitHub repo link for this complete example on the description below. Hope this video was helpful to you, and if it was, please click on the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching and hope to see you on the next video.